Hey, Joey here, and in this short bonus video, I just want to give you a crash course in using Adobe Premiere. If you're doing an animatic, if you're bringing in hardware renders from Cinema 4D, basically anytime you're assembling things to try and work out timing, maybe throwing in a music track and chopping that up a little bit, I really recommend doing that in an editing program, not in After Effects, because Premiere is actually designed to do those things, and just because you can do it in After Effects doesn't mean you should. I think once you finish this lesson, you'll see why doing things in Premiere, it's a lot easier and it can be a lot faster and easier to change. So when you start up Premiere, you're going to be given a screen like this. It's basically asking you, would you like to open up a project that you've previously been working on, or make a new project? So let's just make a new project. Let's call it Demo 2 because we're super creative. Decide where you want to save it and then hit OK. You don't really have to worry about these settings. The default ones are fine. So now we are presented with a completely empty Premiere project. If your screen doesn't look like this, you may have a different layout, the same way that After Effects has saved layouts built into it for different purposes. Premiere has the same feature. So up here at the top, you can see that there's various layouts that you can activate for various tasks. But editing is the default one, and it's typically the one that I'm in unless I'm finishing something and doing color correction. All right, so there's a lot of the same pieces of the interface in Premiere that exist in After Effects. So if you're familiar with After Effects, a lot of this will be familiar to you, I guess. So you have your project window down here. This is where you'll actually import and store all of the video clips, images, MP3s, voiceover tracks, things like that you're going to use in your edit. You've got a toolbar here with like commonly used editing tools. And you've got a timeline the same way that you have in After Effects. These two windows up here I'll talk about in a moment. So the first thing we need to do is import something into Premiere. So I'm going to double click inside the project window. Another way you could do this, by the way, is go up to File and Import, or you could, select the project window here and hit Command I. Works a lot like After Effects does. And I'm gonna go to a folder that I have set up here with a bunch of assets in it. I've got some music tracks, some still frames, some videos. Some of these are play blasts right out of Cinema 4D. Some are actually footage. I've got voiceover tracks. And you can import these individually if you want to, or you can actually just select the folder and hit Enter or hit Import. And Premiere will bring in all of those assets, and it'll actually maintain the folder structure, which is really handy because now things are already organized for me. You can see that right now it's showing me my assets in this icon view. If I come down here and select this button, I can switch to list view, which makes things a little more space efficient. The next thing we need is a sequence. So a sequence in Premiere is like a composition in After Effects. There's many ways to make them. One thing I can do is go up to File and say New Sequence. I can also just hit Command N to do that. And when you open a new sequence, the first thing it does is it asks you for settings for that sequence. Now, when you get into the world of video editing, there's a lot of technical things that start to come into play. Frame rates, frame sizes, codecs, all of these things become a lot more important. Because typically editing is where things are output for broadcast or otherwise. So you kind of have to know a little bit more on the technical side than you do typically when you're inside of After Effects. Now, the good thing is that most of the time as motion designers, we're just putting together rough animatics, things that don't really matter, or we're putting together final things based on renders that we've made in After Effects, okay? So really what we're concerned about most of the time is the frame rate and the frame size. And all of these presets here, they're sort of designed around various cameras that are commonly used to shoot footage, because all of these cameras have different frame rates, different frame sizes, sometimes different pixel aspect ratios. And so Premiere has a bunch of useful presets built in. But a really good one to use just as in general is this first one, ARRI. It's talking about the ARRI camera, the Alexa camera. And it's got a 1080p sort of group of presets, and it's got a 2K group of presets, okay? I'm gonna use the 1080p preset, and when I select these, it's gonna show you basically what changes by picking a different preset is the time base, or the frames per second, and the frame size, and that's the two things that we're really concerned with as motion designers most of the time. So if I select this setting here, I have a 1080, so 1920 by 1080, 24 frames per second sequence. Hit OK. There we go. I can now come over here and I can click on the name and I could rename this something like Rough Cut. Cool, okay? So that's one way to create a sequence. And an easier way, so let's pretend that we actually want to sort of piece together a bunch of rough renders from Cinema 4D. So if I go into the rough folder here, and what I'm going to do here, I'm actually going to double click this rough folder, and it's going to open it kind of in its own window like this. So I've still got my project window here, but one tab over, I've got my rough bin. I can click and drag and sort of move this around just like in After Effects if I want to. I could actually detach it by moving it over to a different monitor and bringing it back on like this. And then what I could do is click this button, and now I can actually see little thumbnails. And as I mouse over, I can actually see my little play blasts moving. It's a really handy way of knowing what I have going on. And what's cool is if I drag one of these clips, like if you look at this timeline here, you can see that there is no sequence loaded into it at the moment. So let me find my first shot of my sequence, which I believe is this little tracking shot here. If I just drag this to this window and let go, what's going to happen is Premiere is actually going to create a sequence for me based on that clip's settings. And you can see that here it is. Here is that sequence, S12, because that was the name of the clip. So if I go back into my project browser, I can actually, and I just hit the tilde key, which works the same way in Premiere as it does in After Effects. It temporarily maximizes whatever your mouse is over. I can actually drag that out into my main bin. And what I'm going to do is come over here and click this button and create a new bin. It's basically just another folder inside of your project window. It lets you organize things, and I'm going to call this Edits. And I can just drag this in there so things are organized, and I can call this Rough Edit, and there we go. And so now what I can do is start to build my edit. So how does this actually work? So let me open up this bin again, all right? And when let's say that I want to start with this shot here, okay? So if I double click this shot, what happens is this shot gets loaded into this window, which is called the source window. When you're editing, you always have sort of two things you're paying attention to. The source, the current image or piece of audio or piece of video that you're kind of looking at and thinking of putting into your edit. And then this other window, your program window. So this source window shows you whatever clip is currently loaded that you're currently looking at. Your program window shows you whichever frame in this sequence your playhead is parked over. It works just like After Effects, okay? So let's say that I've got this clip here. By the way, spacebar. Spacebar is what plays your sequence. And this brings up the first reason, and frankly, one of the most important reasons that I recommend editing in Premiere. You'll notice that there's no rendering, there's no RAM preview. It just plays instantly. And it makes it a lot quicker to move back and forth between different frames, which you can do with the arrow keys. You hit spacebar, it plays, it stops, it plays, it stops. It's really fast, very responsive. So let me hit play and pretend that right there, okay, right as that green, sort of shape comes up out of the ground, I want to cut to a different shot. So what I can do here is I can look for maybe this shot, and I can double click it, and I can sort of, clicking down here in this area, I can grab my playhead, kind of scrub around, right? And I could find, or I could try a different shot just by double clicking, right? So maybe right there. Right at this moment in the clip, right? Okay, right before these yellow and red things start, I want to cut to this clip. So how would I do that? So when you're editing and you have a clip that has, more video in it than you actually need, you need to tell Premiere which piece of that clip you want. And the way you do that is by setting an in point and an out point. And you do that by hitting the I for in and O for out buttons on your keyboard. So I'm going to find that exact frame I want. I can use the arrows to be even more precise, hit I. And you'll see that now Premiere has sort of marked this area. The in point is there, and the out point is actually the end of the clip. So if I hit spacebar and I just let this play a little bit, let's say right there, that's as much of the clip as I want, I can now hit O. And there we go. Now I have my in and my out marked. Now I want to put that clip right where my playhead is. So what I can do is click and drag this video right over to this window here. And you get a bunch of nifty options. I can just hit insert, and you can see that what that did was that actually took that clip and inserted it into my timeline right here and pushed everything else down, okay? So if I undo and redo, you can see what it's doing. Well, another option is to just overwrite. So now it overwrites what's there. It doesn't actually push the rest of the clips down in the timeline. Another way is to literally just click and drag and put this wherever I want. And that's typically what I do because it just feels very tactile and it makes sense to me, okay? And now I can select this clip and I can hit delete. And so now I have my first edit. So we get to here, the green light starts to go, and then we cut to this shot. Perfect. And that's it. I would just continue to, sort of pick shots that, and setting in and out points and picking the shots and playing with it in the order I want. Now you'll notice one big difference between using Premiere and using After Effects is that in After Effects, if I was to do something like this, all of these clips would be on different layers and it would look like sort of staggered stair steps. But in Premiere, tracks can have different clips on the exact same track, which makes a lot more sense for editing. And here's why. Let's say that I like going from this shot to this shot, but the edit is actually happening a little bit later than I want it to. I'd actually like to cut about here, okay? So I'm going to teach you a couple of hotkeys now. Plus and minus on your keyboard, they zoom in and out of your timeline. Very, very handy. So I'm going to zoom in a little bit. So what I could do is mouse over this edit, pull it backwards, and then pull this edit backwards, okay? But there's also some other tools over here that kind of give you shortcuts to do that. So this tool here, the Ripple Edit tool, B is the hotkey, lets you hover over an edit and move the entire edit, okay? As opposed to moving either side, it moves both sides at the same time. So I can just move the edit to there, just like that, okay? Perfect, right? And now the cut is in a different spot. Now that Ripple Edit tool, that actually moves everything down. If I zoom out and I move this edit, you'll see it actually not only moves the edit, but it also pulls everything from the end of the timeline backwards, right? So there's another tool. If you click and hold, there's the Ripple Edit and the Rolling Edit, right? So the Rolling Edit just moves the edit, but it doesn't change any of the timing, okay? You don't have to learn every single tool in Premiere. And honestly, if you don't use it a lot, sometimes it's just easier to use the arrow tool and just manually move the edit where you want it. It's still pretty quick, okay? All right, so now let's talk about audio. Let's go back to our project bin and let's go to music here. And if I double click this audio file here, you'll be able to hear the audio once I hit spacebar. All right, piece of cake. And if I use the same plus and minus arrow keys, you can see that with the source window selected, I can actually zoom in and out of the waveform really easily. So for example, if I just wanted to use the part of the track where it kicks in, right there, I can move the playhead as close as I can kind of visually get, hit plus a few times, use the arrow keys to nudge over and then set my in point right there. Then I can zoom out, stop right there and hit O for an out, okay? So now because this is an audio clip, I have a few ways I can move it onto the timeline where I want it, okay? So the easiest way is to just grab this little icon here, drag audio only, and just place it where I want, okay? So if I just drag it and let go, there it is. And now if I move my playhead and hit space, okay? Now that audio is not in the right spot. I actually want it to start right there. So I can just move it there. See? Piece of cake. Here's some other ways that you can move things onto the timeline. Down here in the timeline, you may have noticed that there are some lit up little boxes, okay? So let me explain what these are. On the left side here, this is where you patch in which track the source material is going to go to. Now I can just click and drag and place this wherever I want. But if you're editing a lot, you're gonna wanna use hotkeys. It just makes everything go faster. So if I wanna place this on a certain track, let's say on track 2, what I can do is move this down to track 2. And this is basically saying, take the audio from the source and patch it to track 2 in the program. And so now if I drag this over and I say overwrite, it will place it there. I can also use hotkeys for this. The overwrite hotkey is the period key on your keyboard, and insert is the comma key. So you can actually very quickly insert, multiple instances of this just using those hotkeys. Okay. All right. So let me delete all these extra copies, and let me go back here and move our audio, and then this sequence is basically good to go. Okay. Let's look at another example here. So let's say that I wanted to cut together an animatic for, say, an explainer video or something like that. So what I could do is create a new sequence, and let's just create it at 1080, 24 frames per second, and we can call this animatic. Okay, and I'll put that in my edits bin. You can see there's nothing there yet. We'll go to our assets folder, and let me first grab a piece of music. Let's try this one. There we go. Okay. Now, where do I want that music to start? Right when that music kind of kicks in after the drum intro. Right there. All right. So I'm going frame by frame back. I'm going to hit I, and then I'm just going to drag this audio right onto track 1. Okay. Cool. So now I've got that going. Next thing I need to do is put in the voiceover. So I've got a scratch voiceover here.
Hit record. Test 1, 2. I've got audio levels. And I'm
all right, so I could find my first clip of audio.
Your attention is a precious commodity.
All right, so let me grab that I, move to the end, O, and then I can place this on track 2. Then I can grab the next line.
Your attention is a precious commodity.
Now that's actually just another take of it, so.
People fight for it.
There it is, there's the next line.
People fight for it.
See, in, out, grab it, place it. Now let's zoom in here. And I'm gonna play this and let you listen to it.
Your attention is a precious commodity. People fight for it.
You're probably noticing that you can't actually hear the voiceover because the music is too loud. So a lot of times when you're mixing music and voiceover, you're gonna need to set audio levels. And there's a few ways to do that, of course. Here's a really easy way. If you select a clip and you hit G, it will bring up the audio gain settings for that clip. And so I can just say, let's adjust the gain to minus 20 decibels, okay? To know exactly what values to use, you just gotta kind of try some different things, and eventually with experience, you'll kind of know 20 decibels is good for ducking music to have voiceover sit on top of it. If you just feel like the music's too loud overall, maybe you duck at 6 decibels.
Your attention is a precious commodity. People fight for it.
All right, now that feels too quiet to me, and it'd be nice if I had an easier way of kind of adjusting this. So what I'm gonna do is go to the beginning here, and I'm gonna switch temporarily to audio layout, okay? So you can see now, here's my project window, here's my program window. My source window is currently hidden, but I see an audio mixer now, okay? And specifically, there's 2 mixers in Premiere. There's a clip mixer that will adjust the volume of an individual clip. So if I hit play and I say, okay, track 2. So this fader right here, this is for track 1. This is for track 2.
Is a precious commodity. People fight for it.
So if I took the track 2 fader
Your attention
and knocked it down like this,
people fight.
You'll see that it jumps back up when it gets to the next clip because it's actually adjusting the audio level of specific clips. Often what I do is instead of adjusting the clip, I'll adjust the volume of the entire track. So if I go over one to audio track mixer,
your attention is a precious commodity.
I can now adjust the volume of, say, track 1, which is the music track. I could bring that down.
Your attention is a precious commodity. People fight for it.
And what's great about doing it this way is I can hit play and do this in real time and find that sweet spot.
Your attention is a precious commodity. People fight for it.
Right about there feels good, okay? Then I can go back to my editing layout and I've got audio levels set for the music track that work pretty well. Then the next thing I need to do is start laying in the visuals. And so what I can do here is open up this folder, and let me switch this to icon view. And you can see here, these are sort of roughly sketched frames, sort of storyboards that I can use to build an animatic. And so what I can do, because these are still frames, if I open them up, you'll see when I scrub through in the source window, nothing changes. Still images can be made to be as long as you want. And all I need to do is drag this to the timeline, play.
Your attention
until I feel like I'm ready to cut to the next one. Trim the end with my, just by hovering the mouse over the end and dragging. And basically just do this until it feels good. I can zoom in.
Your attention is a precious commodity.
Right? Piece of cake. The last thing I want to show you in terms of editing is what to do if you're ever working with video footage that has video and audio, okay? So let's do this. Let's start up a new sequence. So I'll make a new sequence. We can leave this. Let's try 2997 just for funsies, all right? And in fact, I'm gonna name this the funsies sequence. So in my videos folder, I actually have some footage. These are projects that the studio Gunnar has done. And I downloaded them when I was cutting together a little trailer featuring some of their work. And you can see
our world is home to 600 million girls. Girls with big dreams.
That there's video and audio, okay? So when you have something in your source window that has video and audio, look down here in the timeline. You'll see that V1 and A1 are active in this patching section here. So usually by default, V1 is patched to V1, A1 is patched to A1. So if I drag this over and I say insert or overwrite, you'll see that it puts the video on V1 and the audio on A1. But I could easily patch these to different tracks, right? Just like that. And of course, this works with hotkeys as well. So this is good to know. I could also tap this, which deactivates the audio. So now it's only gonna bring over the video. Vice versa, I could only bring over the audio if I wanted to, okay? And you can also do this sort of directly here. If I grab the audio only and drag it down here, you'll see that it only grabs the audio. If I grab the video, it only grabs the video, okay? If I want both, I can literally just click and drag I can kind of click anywhere in the middle here. Now you'll see when I do that, it's actually asking me if I would like to change my sequence settings automatically to match the clip. In a lot of cases, that's what you want to do. The reason it's asking me that is because this video is at 24 frames a second. You can see that this Google video they did is at 30 frames a second. And so when you're mixing frame rates, it gets really technical. Good rule of thumb is you always want to set your frame rate to be as the same frame rate as the highest frame rate source you're using. So I would actually keep my existing settings and let Premiere sort of add frames as needed. And that's basically it. So now you know how to add music, voiceover, set levels. You know how to edit. You've even learned a little bit of a trick with the Ripple edit tool. And the last thing I want to show you for this demo is how to export from Premiere. So let's pretend that we want to export this animatic so that we can bring it into Adobe After Effects, okay? Well, this music track keeps going. It's way too long. I could zoom out so I could see the end and pull it all the way back, but of course there's a quicker way. I could use the razor blade tool. Hotkey is C, and then you can just click anywhere in a track, hit V to go back to your arrow tool, select and delete that, okay? So now you're good to go. So let's pretend that I want to export this. So what you can do is go up to File, and you're gonna go Export Media. The hotkey is Command M, and that's gonna bring up this dialog box with export settings in it, okay? Now, depending on where this is going, is this gonna be the final delivery for a client? Is this just for you to go to After Effects? It's gonna dictate the settings that you use. If you use the default, which creates an H.264 movie file, and it matches the source. And what it means is it looks at your sequence settings. And if it's a 1080, 2997 sequence, it's gonna automatically just match that and you don't have to do anything. Typically, that works for most of what you're gonna be doing as a motion designer. There's a whole lot of presets here that determine bitrate and things like that. And if you're uploading this to YouTube or Facebook or Vimeo, you can use those presets. But if it's just an animatic for you, you can also just leave the default settings as they are. Then you can click on this output name and tell Premiere where you would like this output to go. So maybe in this Premiere 101 folder, I can make an output folder and I could call this Animatic V1, and there you go. And then you can hit export and it will export it immediately, or you can add it to the Adobe Media Encoder render queue, which is a little bit fancier. And the only reason I point that out is that by default, if you just hit enter right now, that's what it's gonna do. It's gonna open up Media Encoder, and then you're gonna export from there, or you can just hit export and it will encode it and export it directly from Premiere. And that's it. Now you're done. You have all the tools you need to do animatics, to take hardware renders from Cinema 4D, cut them together with some music, see how the timing's working, decide if you need to change a camera move. And hopefully, this is just gonna be a little teaser, a little taste of the power of using Adobe Premiere as an editing tool instead of doing it in After Effects. I hope you learned a lot from this lesson, and good luck.